Welcome back to Inside the Philippines Journals. If you are new here, this is the channel where we sit down with the men and women who left everything familiar behind and came to these islands to start over. And we let them tell you the truth about how it went. All of it. The parts that worked and the parts that did not. Tonight's story belongs to a man named Magnus. He is 67. He is from Sweden, and for 30 years he worked inside a prison. A corrections officer on a cell block, which is another way of saying he spent his whole working life learning to read other men. When to worry about one, when one was lying, when one had quietly stopped hoping. He came to the Philippines the way a great many men come here, with less money than he once had, and a hole in his days where his purpose used to be. But Magnus noticed something when he arrived, something he could not stop noticing, once he had seen it. And what he saw frightened him. Not the country, not the people, something else. Something that happens out here to a particular kind of man, over and over, until it starts to look like a law of nature. He set out, very deliberately, not to let it happen to him. Before we begin, do us a small favor. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from tonight. And if you have lived out here yourself, tell us what you have seen, because you have probably seen it too. If these stories matter to you, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making them. Here's his story, in his own words. People ask me what a prison teaches you, and they expect something dramatic. Knife fights, riots. It is not that. Mostly, a prison teaches you to watch. 30 years I stood on the block at Kumla. That is our big one, up near Orebro. High walls, hard men, the worst that Sweden makes. And 30 years I watched. You learn a man's face before he himself knows his own trouble. You learn the small change in him. The one who stops shaving. The one who stops going to the yard. The one who used to complain every single day and now says nothing at all. That last one, the quiet one. He is the one you watch closest. Because a man who has stopped complaining has stopped hoping. And a man who has stopped hoping will do something, sooner or later. Usually to himself. I tell you this now because it matters for everything that comes after. It is the whole of my story, really. A man who spent his life learning to see the moment another man gives up, and then found himself in a place absolutely full of men, in the middle of giving up. But I am getting ahead. That is a bad habit. Let me go back. I am from Orebro. Ordinary town, ordinary life. Nothing to write on a postcard. I married Birgitta when I was 26. We had one son, Anders, who lives now in Gothenburg and calls me, I would say, every second Sunday. Which is fair enough. He has his own family. Birgitta and I, we were not a great romance from the films. We were something better, I think. We were comfortable together. 41 years of small mornings and the same chair at the same table. You do not know what that is worth until it is gone. She got sick in the autumn. By the spring she was gone. Cancer, the kind that does not negotiate. And I will be honest with you, because there is no point sitting here and lying. When she died, a large part of me simply stopped. I still went to work. I still stood on the block. But something had gone quiet in me, and I recognized the quiet. Because I had spent 30 years watching it come over other men. I knew what it was. I just did not much care. Then came the money, which is the stupid part, and the part one am least proud of. I had done everything correct my whole life. Saved. Never gambled, never speculated, lagom in all things, which is a Swedish word. It means not too much and not too little, the right amount. I had my pension from the state, which is decent, and I had built up over the years, with the house and the saving, Something over 300,000 euros. Enough. Enough for an old man alone to be safe. And a man I trusted. A former colleague. A good man, actually. He brought me into a fund. Green energy. Forestry. Very Swedish. Very respectable. All the right words. Safe as the church, he said. I put in a large part of it. More than I should have in one place, which is the one rule everybody knows and nobody follows. Within 18 months, the thing was gone. Not stolen exactly, not in a way the police could use. Just gone, the way these things go, the clever men at the top made whole, and the rest of us left looking at a letter. When the dust had settled, I had a little under 100,000 euros left, and my state pension, and a house that felt like a museum of a life I no longer lived. 64 years old. A widower. Most of my safety burned. Sitting in the dark half of the Swedish year, which is a long dark, believe me, in a chair across from an empty chair. Now, I am a practical man, whatever else. I did the arithmetic. In Sweden, on what I had left, I would spend the rest of my life being careful, counting, deciding between the heating and the small pleasures. Not poor, but never again easy. And a former colleague of mine, an officer named Kjell, who had retired 2 years before me, he had gone out to the Philippines, and he sent me a message now and then, and he lived on the same money that would keep me anxious in Örebro, like a modest king. Warm every day, English spoken everywhere, his pension going 4-5 times as far. So I did not come here for love. I want that clear from the start. I did not come here dreaming of a young girl on a beach. I came here because I ran the numbers, and the numbers said, out there, the wreck of your money becomes enough again. I came here to not be careful for the rest of my life. And, though I did not say it out loud even to myself, I came here because the quiet had got into me. And I thought, perhaps, that heat and noise and strangeness might shake it loose. I sold the house. I ring-fenced what remained, and I will tell you exactly what that means, because it matters. I kept the bulk of my savings in Sweden, in the bank, in euros, where no charm and no emergency and no soft story could reach it in a single afternoon. I brought only what I needed to land on my feet. Then I got on a plane at Arlanda in January, in snow, and got off it in Manila into a wall of heat so thick I stopped on the jet bridge like a fool and just breathed it. I was 64. I had no plan except one. I would watch, the way I always watched, and I would not give up. That was the whole plan. It turned out to be the only one that mattered. The place I chose was Dumaguete. Kjell was there, and Kjell said it was a soft landing, and he was right. It is a small city on the island of Negros. They call it the City of Gentle People. And it has a university, so there are young people and bookshops and a bit of life. And it has a long seafront they call Rizal Boulevard, where the whole town walks in the evening when the heat finally lets go. Palm trees, the water on one side, little stalls selling grilled things on sticks, the smell of charcoal and diesel and the sea all mixed together. Tricycles buzzing past like angry wasps. The first evening Kjell walked me along it, and I thought, all right, a man could breathe here. A man could put himself back together here. I rented first. I want to say that clearly for the young ones watching who think they will step off the plane and buy their dream. I rented a plain apartment 2 streets back from the boulevard. No sea view. 12,000 pesos a month, which is about 190 euros. And I could have paid 3 times that, and did not, because I did not yet know the place, and you do not buy anything, not property and not a life, in a place you do not yet know. Kjell laughed at me. He said I would loosen up. I said perhaps. I did not loosen up. That turned out to matter too. Chell took me, of course, to where the men gather. Every town out here has these places, a strip of bars where the foreign men sit. And this is where I first saw the thing I have been circling around this whole time. The thing this whole story is really about. It was maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. Hot already, the light hard and white. And along the bar, on the high stools, sat perhaps 8 or 9 men. Western men. My age, some of them. Older some. And I stood in the doorway, and I felt something turn over in my stomach. Because I knew those men. Not personally. I knew them the way I knew the quiet ones on the block. I had spent 30 years learning exactly that face. They were not drinking to celebrate anything. They were drinking the way you drink when there is nothing at the end of the day to be sober for. San Miguel bottles sweating on the bar, one after another, from the morning. Eyes that did not really land on anything. Big bellies, thin arms, the particular gray color a Western face goes out here when it is more rum than blood. A couple of them had young Filipina women beside them, bored, thumbs going on their phones, and the men talked. God, they talked. Loud, all of them, over the top of each other, about the government, about their ex-wives back home, about the last girl who had robbed them, about how everyone out here was a thief. Nobody listening to anybody. Just noise to keep the quiet away. Chell said, "Come," and introduced me around. And they were friendly enough in that hungry way lonely men are friendly. And I sat, and I had one beer, and I watched. And there was one man in particular. English fellow. Roy. Big man once, you could see it, gone soft now, 71 years old, a face like a sunset, broken veins and good humor, and something dead in behind the eyes. Roy bought a round for everyone before he even knew my name. Roy was, I would learn, always buying the round. Roy told me within 20 minutes that he had been a maritime engineer, that he had money coming, that his lady's mother was sick, that the Philippines was paradise if you knew how to handle it. And he laughed the whole time, and every single thing he said was a small brick in a wall he was building against something he did not want to look at. I liked Roy immediately. I want to say that too. He was warm and generous, and he was drowning. And he did not know it, or he knew it, and had decided not to know it, which is worse. I walked home along the boulevard that night, past the families and the students and the young couples eating balut at the stalls, and I could not shake the picture of those men on the stools. Because here is the thing that no brochure tells you, and every one of us who stays out here eventually learns. The Philippines does not create those men. It reveals them. Whatever is hollow in a man, this place will find it, and fill it with rum and heat and easy company until there is nothing left of him but the shape. And I thought, walking home, 64 years old, a widower with a hole in him and a burned pension, I thought, very clearly, the way you think a thing you know is true. Magnus, you are exactly the raw material those men were made from. You have every single ingredient. If you are not careful, in 3 years, that is you on that stool. I did not sleep much that night, but I did not reach for a bottle either. I got up before dawn because I could not sleep, and I walked out onto the boulevard in the gray light, and the fishermen were coming in, and I watched them work, and I made myself a promise that sounds small, and is not small at all. I said, tomorrow you will get up at the same time, and the day after. You will run this like a block. You will run it like you know how to run something. Because I did know how to run something. It was the one thing 30 years had left me that the fund could not burn. That was the beginning. Not romance, not property, a promise made to myself in the gray, watching other men come in from the sea. Let me tell you what I built. because the building is the whole point. The men on the stools, they had lost the two things that hold a person up, and they had lost them so slowly, they never felt them go. Routine and purpose. That is all a life is, at the bottom of it. Something to do each day, and a reason the doing matters. Take those from a man, and give him money enough not to work, and drink cheap enough to drown in, and you have built a machine for making the walking dead. I had watched the state do the same thing to prisoners for 30 years, take away a man's routine and his reason, and I had watched what came out the other end. I was not going to volunteer for it. So I made a schedule. I laugh at myself a little telling you this, an old man with a schedule pinned to his refrigerator like a boy. But it saved me, so I will not laugh too hard. Up at 5:30, before the heat. A long walk, the full length of the boulevard and back, when the air is still cool and gray, and the town is only fishermen and old women sweeping. Then, 3 days a week, I swam. There is a pool at one of the resorts, you pay a small monthly fee, and I swam lengths like a man being chased, because a body that is used stops asking for rum. The other days I lifted a few weights in a cheap gym above a hardware store, where the young Filipino men were very kind to the old Swede, and corrected my form and called me sir in a way that made me feel, for the first time in a long time, like a person and not a ghost. Then, breakfast. And here is where the routine did something I did not plan. I took my breakfast every morning at a carinderia near the public market. You know a carinderia? It is a little open eatery, a few plastic tables, pots of food behind glass. You point at what you want. This one belonged to a woman named Marilu, and I ate there every morning, not because of her, at first, but because it was clean and cheap, and the coffee was strong and it was part of the schedule. 50 pesos for rice and fish and coffee. Less than €1. And routine, you understand. Routine puts you in the same chair, in front of the same person, every single day. And that is how a real thing grows, slowly, in daylight, without anybody deciding it should. I want to say something now about the drink, because it is the center of the whole disease, and I have been circling it. I am not a man who cannot drink. In Sweden, I had my beer, my snaps at midsummer, lagom, the right amount. But I saw very quickly out here that lagom does not survive this place, unless you build a wall around it. In Sweden, the drink is expensive and controlled. We have the Systembolaget, the state shop, closed on Sundays. It makes a man take a breath before he drinks. Here, a large bottle of Red Horse, which is strong beer, is maybe 50 pesos, less than €1, and the bar is open at 8 in the morning, and there is a friendly broken man on the next stool who is very glad you have joined him. There is no friction, nothing to make you take the breath, and a lonely man with money, and nothing to do, and no friction between him and the bottle. That man is already half gone and does not know it. So I made a rule, and the rule was simple, and rules only work when they are simple. I did not drink alone, ever. Not once, in 3 years, have I taken a drink by myself in my own rooms. If I wanted a beer, I had it with people, at a meal, in the evening, like a civilized person. And then I went home. The men on the stools, almost every one of them, drank alone in company, if you understand my meaning. Surrounded by others, and utterly alone, pouring it into the hole. I decided the hole in me would not be filled that way. It would be filled with work, or it would stay empty and honest. An empty hole you can live with. A hole full of rum will kill you slow. Now, purpose. Routine I could build with a schedule. Purpose is harder, because purpose has to come from outside yourself. It has to be some way you are of use to something that is not you. And this I stumbled into. There is a small foundation in Dumaguete, run partly by a Belgian woman that helps the street children and does a feeding program. I went, honestly, only because I was restless, and Kjell's endless bar talk had begun to feel like poison. And they had no use for a Swedish prison officer who spoke no Vision, or they thought they had none, until they discovered I could fix things. 30 years around institutions, you learn plumbing, wiring, how to make a broken thing work one more year. So I became the man who fixed the foundation's building. 2, 3 mornings a week. Unpaid, of course. And I will tell you plainly, those hours with a wrench in my hand, useful, needed, a small boy watching me solder a pipe and asking why, those hours did more for the quiet in me than any amount of money or beer or sunshine ever could. That is what the men on the stools had lost and could not find their way back to. Not money. Use. The feeling that if you did not get up in the morning, some small thing in the world would go wrong that you and only you could put right. Take that away from a man, and all the sunsets in the tropics will not save him. I saw Roy most days. He would be at the bar by the time I passed with my toolbox, and he would call out, "Magnus, you mad Viking, come and have a cold one," and sometimes in the evening I would. And I watched Roy the way I had watched men on the block, and what I saw made me sad, because Roy had once had all of it, the routine, the purpose, the discipline of a working ship, and he had let it all drain out and did not know where the plug was. He talked about his lady, Jelly, a woman 30 years younger, and her sick mother, and the piggery they were going to build, and the eyes never quite matched the words. I did not preach at him. You cannot preach a man off the stool. I had learned that on the block, too. You can only keep your own door in order and leave it open. And Marilou. Every morning, the same chair, the strong coffee. She was 52, a widow, her husband a fisherman drowned in a bad season 8 years before. She ran that little eatery herself, up before me, cooking, and she had 2 grown children, a son who drove a truck in Cebu, and a daughter who was a nurse in Saudi Arabia and sent money home every month. That last part one noticed. This was not a woman waiting for a foreigner to save her. She had her own income, small but hers, and a daughter supporting her, and a straight back, and a way of running her tables that I recognized, because I run things too. We are the same animal, I thought, watching her chase off a man who tried to leave without paying. 2 people who keep order. We talked, mornings, a little more each week. Never anything romantic, not for a long time. Just 2 grown people who had each buried a spouse, finding it easy to sit near each other. I told myself it was only the coffee. But I got up a little more gladly in the mornings, and I am too old to lie to myself about why. I need to explain something now, and I am going to be careful, because this is where a lot of good men go wrong, and I do not want you to miss it. It is about how these things are supposed to start, and how, if you are not a fool, you let them start slowly. Every warning story you have heard, and you have heard them on this very channel, they nearly all have the same shape at the beginning. A man arrives lonely. A woman is warm to him fast, very fast, too fast, and he is so starved for warmth that the speed feels like fate instead of what it usually is, which is technique. Within a month, there is love. Within 2, there is a sick mother. Within 3, there is money flowing to a family he has never met. And within a year, there is a house going up on land he will never own. The speed is the whole trick. It does not give the watching part of your brain time to do its job. So with Marilou, and I mean this as advice more than romance, I let it be slow. Months of mornings before I ever asked her to walk the boulevard with me in the evening. And when we did begin, properly, to be something. I did a thing that I think saved us both a great deal of pain. I sat with her over a plate of grilled fish at a place on the water, and I told her the truth about my money. All of it. I told her I was not a rich foreigner. I told her about the fund, and the fool I had been, and exactly how much I had, which was enough for me to live, but not enough to be anybody's bank. And I watched her face while I said it, the way I have watched 1,000 faces while they received hard news. And I will tell you what I saw. Relief. She was relieved. Because, she said, and I have never forgotten it, when a rich Kano courts a woman here, the whole town starts pulling at her, her family, her neighbors, everyone with a hand out, and she becomes a rope in a tug-of-war. She had seen it wreck other women. She did not want to be the woman on the arm of a walking wallet. She wanted, she said, a man who ate her fish and fixed her broken freezer, which by then I had twice. That is what doing it right feels like, if you want to know. It is not exciting. It is not the film. It is two people telling each other the boring truth early, so that neither one is building a fantasy the other will have to pay for later. But do not think I am telling you a fairy tale. There were tests. Boundaries are not something you set once, and then relax. They are a wall you have to keep repointing, brick by brick, or the weather takes it down. And the first real test of mine came, as they so often do out here, wrapped in the softest possible cloth, wrapped in family, and in love, and in a sick relative. It is always a sick relative. And I nearly let it past me, because I was happy, and a happy man's guard drops. That is the danger nobody tells you about being happy. It makes you stop watching. Now I have to tell you about the condo, because it is the single largest thing I did right, and it is the thing I beg every man who writes to me to understand before he wires 1 peso anywhere. After about a year, I was settled. I knew Dumaguete now. I knew its weather and its prices and its people, and I was tired of a landlord and tired of a plain rented box. And every foreigner reaches this moment, the moment where he wants a home of his own, a place that is his, roots. It is a good and human wish. It is also the exact moment the ground opens under most men out here, so listen to me. You cannot, as a foreigner, own land in the Philippines. It is written into their constitution, and it is not going to change for you, no matter how much you love someone. What men do, what the bars are full of, is they get around this the way the barstool wisdom tells them to. They build a beautiful house, 2-3 million pesos, 30,000-50,000 euros, sometimes the whole of a man's savings, and because he cannot own the land, they put it in her name, or in her father's name, or they build it on the family's provincial land, on the promise, the warm sure promise, that it will always be his home. And for many of them it is, for a while. And then the relationship ends, as relationships do, or she dies, or her family decides they have had enough of the old Kano, and the man discovers, at 68, that the house he built with his life's savings is not his, was never his, and he is standing outside the gate of his own home with a suitcase. I have met that man. I have met him more than once on the stools. It is one of the surest ways there is to manufacture a member of the Walking Dead. You take a man's money, and his home and his dignity in one stroke, all of it perfectly legal, all of it his own signature. I was not going to do that. Not because I did not trust Marilu. By then, I did, and rightly. But trust is not a legal structure, and love is not a deed, and a wise man does not put the roof over his head inside another person's goodwill, however real that goodwill is. Marilou, for her part, never once asked me to. That was itself a sign, if you are collecting signs. She never once steered me toward a house on family land. When I raised property at all, she said, "Buy something that is yours, so that if I am a devil you did not see, you are still safe." A woman who tells you to protect yourself from her is not the woman you need protecting from. So I did the one thing a foreigner actually can do cleanly. I bought a condominium. The law allows foreigners to own condominium units outright, in our own names, on the title, so long as the foreigners in the whole building stay under 40%, which in a small Dumaguete building is never a problem. I found a modest unit, 2 bedrooms, 2nd floor, walking distance to the boulevard and to Marilou's Carinderia, in a small, well-built block with a Filipino developer who had all his papers straight, and I had a Filipino lawyer, my own lawyer, not the seller's cousin, check every single one of those papers twice. The unit cost 3 million pesos. That is about 48,000 euros, roughly half of everything I had in the world. I thought very hard before I spent it, because half of everything is not lagom, it is a lot, and a careful man does not spend it lightly. But this was the right kind of spending. It was mine, in my name, on a title I could hold in my hand. It could not be taken by a family, or a breakup, or a soft story. It would be there when I was old and slow, and I made sure it would pass cleanly to Marilou, or to my son as I chose, through a proper will, not through hope. And it left me still with the ring-fenced money in Sweden, some 40-something thousand euros, untouched. In a bank, a soft story could not reach across 10,000 kilometers in an afternoon. That was the whole architecture of it. A home that was legally mine, a reserve that was physically out of reach, and a monthly pension, 1,600 euros, that covered my modest life several times over. On that foundation, and only on that foundation, a man can afford to be generous, because he is generous from the top of the cup and never from the bottom. And I was generous. I want to be honest about that too, because I am not describing a miser. When Marilou's freezer died for good, I bought the new one. When her daughter's remittance was late one month, I covered the market bill. Small things, given freely, from a man who could afford them, to a partner who never demanded them. That is not the same as being bled. Being bled is when the giving is not yours to decide, when it comes with a story and a deadline and a tightness in your chest, and it never, ever stops. I gave from choice. The men on the stools gave from pressure, and told themselves it was choice, and that is the whole difference in the world. Family. I have to talk about family, because in this country you do not marry a person, you marry a web, and the web is not evil. That is the thing the bitter men on the stools never understand. The web is just how survival works, when there is no welfare state, no pension for the poor, nothing but each other. When times are hard, the family is the safety net, and if you are the richest strand in the web, the whole web quite naturally leans your way. It is not always a con. Very often it is just gravity. But gravity will pull a man down all the same, con or no con, if he does not know how to stand. So I set the rules early, and I set them kindly, and I set them out loud, which is the trick nobody uses. Filipinos avoid confrontation. They save face, how they call it, shame, and so problems out here do not get argued. They get hidden, and they fester. I refused to play that game. Early on, at a family lunch, one of the cousins made the first soft approach. A business idea. A sure thing, he only needed a little capital. And instead of the two things a foreigner usually does, which are either handing it over to be liked or exploding and making an enemy, I did a third thing. I smiled and I said, very calm, in front of everyone, so it could never be a secret negotiation later, I said, I am a retired man on a fixed pension. I am not a bank, and I am not an investor. I will always share a meal with this family, and I will help in a true emergency, a hospital, a real one. But I do not put money into business, ever, because I already lost a fortune that way in Sweden, and I am too old to lose another. That is not personal. That is just how it is with me. And do you know what happened? Nothing bad. A little disappointment, quickly gone. And then something I did not expect, which was respect. Because I had told them the shape of me clearly, and now everybody knew the shape, and nobody had to lose face testing it in secret. The requests, the soft, dangerous ones, they mostly stopped because there was no soft target there to aim at. I was a wall, but a friendly wall, and people do not waste their strength pushing on a friendly wall that does not move. That is the thing. You are not cruel. You are clear. Cruelty and clarity look nothing alike, though frightened men confuse them. The men on the stools were not clear. They were either doormats or tyrants, and both get eaten. But here is where I nearly slipped, and I promised you I would not pretend I was perfect. Because a wall that faces the whole world sometimes forgets to watch the ground under its own feet. And the trouble, when it finally came, did not come from the cousins I had faced down at the lunch table. It came from inside the house, quietly, in numbers. And it very nearly got past me, because it was small, and because I had let myself get comfortable. And comfortable is when the watchman falls asleep. I have to explain how I kept our money, because the way I kept it is the only reason I caught what I caught. Marilu and I, once we were living as partners, we ran a household together, and a household costs money, and money shared is money that needs a system, or it becomes money that grows legs. I did not want to be the foreigner who hands over a fat envelope every month and never asks a question. Because that man is not being trusting. He is being lazy, and lazy with money out here is a slow suicide. But I also did not want to be a tyrant counting her every peso like she was a prisoner and I was back on the block. So we did it the grown-up way. We had a shared arrangement for the house, the market, the bills, and I kept the books. Not to police her. Because I am good at books, and because 30 years of institutions teaches you that a clear ledger is a kindness to everyone, it protects the honest as much as it exposes the dishonest. Every peso in, every peso out. The GCash records, the bank, all of it, once a week, at the kitchen table, with coffee. She thought it was a funny Swedish habit. She humored me. Thank God she humored me. Because here is what I do, what I cannot stop doing, what 30 years burned into me. I do not read a number. I read a pattern. Any one number tells you almost nothing. A man on the block spends 40 kroner at the canteen. That is nothing. But a man who spent nothing at the canteen for 2 years and now spends the exact same small amount every Tuesday. That is not a number. That is a sentence. That is a story. And the story is that something changed on a Tuesday, and you had better find out what. It is never the size of the transaction that talks. It is the rhythm, the regularity. Money has a heartbeat, and a trained ear can hear when the heartbeat is wrong. And about 4 months into keeping our little household books, sitting at the kitchen table one Sunday with my coffee going cold, I heard the heartbeat go wrong. It was small. That is the whole point. It is always small. That is why it works. There was money leaving Marilu's GCash that did not match anything. Not a lot. 2,000 pesos here. Then a few days later, 5,000. Then 2,000 again. 30 euros. 80 euros. 30 euros. Nothing that would frighten anyone. The kind of amount a busy woman running a household would never notice bleeding out and never miss. But I was not a busy woman running a household. I was an old prison officer who reads rhythm, and the rhythm was wrong. Because it was regular. Every week, sometimes twice. And it was always to the same number. A number I did not know. Dressed up in the records as load or as padala. Small transfers, the electronic equivalent of coins slipped out of a pocket. Now, I want you to notice what I did not do, because what you do in this exact moment decides everything. I did not explode. I did not wave the phone in her face and shout, "Who is this? Are you stealing from me? Are you like all the others?" That is what a frightened man does, and a frightened man learns nothing, because the moment you accuse, everybody's shutters come down, and the truth goes into hiding for good. I had run enough investigations on the block to know that you never, ever show your hand at the start. You gather. You watch. You let the pattern fill in before you say one single word. So, I said nothing. For 2 weeks, I said nothing, and I simply watched the numbers, calm as a stone, the way I had watched 1,000 quiet men. And the pattern grew clear. It was adding up to something like 22,000 pesos a month now, more than 350 euros, and climbing, always climbing. That is the other mark of the real thing. It never holds steady. It always grows, because the thing on the other end of it is hungry, and hunger grows. 22,000 pesos was not nothing. 22,000 pesos a month is how a comfortable retirement becomes a careful one, and a careful one becomes a poor one, and a poor one becomes a man on a stool who cannot understand where it all went. This is the actual mechanism. This is how it happens. Not one catastrophe. 1,000 small Tuesdays. And I noticed one more thing. The thing that told me it was not what I first feared. Marilu herself was worried. I could see it. She had gone quiet in a particular way. And I know quiet. Quiet is my whole subject. She was not the spider in this. She was caught in it too. Whatever the money was, it was hurting her to send it. And she was sending it anyway, which meant it was not greed. Greed is light. This was heavy. This was shame carrying something. So one evening, gently, I closed the ledger, and I put my hand flat on it. And I said, "Marilu, I keep these books because I love you, not because I doubt you. And I love you, so I am going to ask you one time, and you can tell me the truth, whatever it is, and we will still be sitting at this table afterward. Where is the money going?" And she cried. And here is where a man has to keep watching, even through tears, because tears out here can be genuine, and tears can be technique, and sometimes, the hardest case, they are both at once. I watched, and what I saw was not the performance I had seen 100 times from men trying to work me on the block. What I saw was relief again. The same relief as the night I told her about my ruined pension. The relief of a person who has been carrying a stone alone and is finally allowed to set it down. It was Boye, her late husband's younger brother. Family, you see. The web. Boye had fallen into Isabong, the online cockfighting, which had gone through this country like a plague. Men betting the roosters on their telephones at 2 in the morning. A whole nation of quiet addicts thumbing away their wages in the dark. Boye had lost his own money, then borrowed, then lost that. And then he had come to Marilu, quietly, the way it is always done, with a story each time. The electric bill, his child's fever. small amounts, a true story stapled to each one, sometimes the story even real. And Marilou, out of Hia, out of loyalty to her dead husband, out of the exact cultural gravity I told you about, had been covering him, and hiding it, not from cruelty but from shame. Because to admit it was to shame Boyet in front of the foreigner, and that is the one thing the culture cannot easily do. Do you see how it works now? Do you see how ordinary it is? There was no villain at that table. There was a grieving woman, a weak, frightened addict, a dead brother's memory, and a machine that eats old men's money one small Tuesday at a time. And if I had not kept the books, if I had handed over the fat, lazy envelope like a trusting fool, that leak would have run for years, growing the whole time. And one day, I would have been the one on the stool, telling Roy that the Philippines was full of thieves, never understanding that nobody had robbed me, that I had simply failed to read a rhythm I already knew how to read. I caught it at month 4. Some men catch it at year 4, and by year 4 it is not 2,000 pesos. It is the house, the savings, the pension, the whole man. That is the only difference between me and the men on the stools. Not virtue, not luck. 4 months instead of 4 years. Reading the pattern early and having the nerve to ask one quiet question instead of shouting or looking away. Now, what you do after you find it, that is the second test, and it is harder than the finding. Because the easy things to do were both wrong. The first easy wrong thing was to explode. To make Marilou choose, him or me, to forbid it, to become the angry foreign master laying down the law over the poor Filipina. And there are men who would tell you that is strength. It is not strength. It is a tantrum, and it would have shamed her, and it would have driven the thing back into the dark, where it would have gone right on running, only now hidden from me, too. The second easy wrong thing was to do nothing, to sigh and say, "It is only 20,000 pesos. I can afford it. She is a good woman. Let her help her family. Do not make trouble." That is what the doormat does. And the doormat gets eaten slowly and calls it love right up until the day the money is gone. I did neither. I did the block thing. The thing 30 years taught me, which is that you solve a problem by facing it, together, in daylight, with a plan, and without shame if you can manage it, because shame is the fuel the whole fire runs on. I said to Marilou, "First, this is not your sin, and I am not angry at you. I need you to hear that, before anything else. You were trying to be a good sister to a dead man's brother. That is not a crime. But you have been fighting a fire with a cup of water, in secret, alone, and it has been burning you, and it was about to start burning us, and secrets are the one thing this house cannot afford. So from tonight, no more secrets about money. Not because I am your warden, because we are partners, and partners cannot each be fighting a different war in the dark. And then we dealt with Boyet, together, not with cruelty. I did not cut him off in the street like a dog, because that only makes an enemy and a story about the cruel Cano. I sat with him, with Marilou beside me, and I did the thing I had done 100 times with men on the block who were killing themselves, which is, I did not lecture and I did not rescue. I said, "Boyet, the money from this house stops today. Completely. Not 1 peso more, and no story will change it, so please do not waste a good story on me. I have heard every story a man can tell, and I am tired." That door is closed, and it will stay closed. But, and this is the part that matters, the part the bitter men leave out. But, I said, if you want to actually stop, not stop for money, stop for real. I will help you find the people who help with this, and I will sit with you while you do it. Because you are family and I do not throw family in the sea. The money? No. My time, my presence, my help getting you to someone who knows how to fix a man? Yes. Which do you want? He wanted the money, of course, at first. They always want the money. He was angry, and there was a story, a very good one. And when the story did not work, there was anger. And when the anger did not work, there was, finally, quiet. And I know that quiet. That is the quiet of a man running out of exits. Some men, in that quiet, turn toward help. Some turn away from it. I could not decide it for him. Nobody can decide it for another man. I learned that lesson so many times it stopped, even hurting. All you can do is close the wrong door firmly and leave the right one open, and let him choose. Boyette, I am glad to say, chose the right door, not that day, but some weeks later, after he had hit the wall a few more times. It is not a fairy tale. He is not cured. An addict is never cured. Only stopped for today. But the money from our house never started again. Not once. Because I closed that door, and I keep it closed, and I check the books every Sunday still, cold coffee and all, and the heartbeat has been clean now for a long time. That is doing it right. It is not soft, and it is not hard. It is clear, and it is kind, and it is relentless, all at once. And it is exhausting, and you have to do it forever. And that is precisely why so few men manage it. Because it is so much easier to just hand over the envelope, or to just leave, or to just climb up on the stool and drown. Roy did not manage it. I have to tell you about Roy now, because Roy is the other half of this story. Roy is what I was afraid of. Roy is the answer to the question this whole story is asking. Roy's jelly had been running exactly the pattern I caught in 4 months, except Roy never kept a book in his life. Roy handed over the envelope, the big lazy trusting envelope, month after month, and never once heard the heartbeat, because Roy did not want to hear it, because hearing it would have meant the paradise was not paradise, and the love was not quite love, and Roy could not afford to know that, so he paid not to know it. The piggery money vanished. The sick mother recovered and fell sick again on a convenient schedule. And the truth, when I gently tried to show it to him one evening, tried to show him his own numbers the way I show mine, Roy did not want it. He got angry at me, not at her. He said I did not understand, that Jelly loved him, that we were not all cold Swedish calculators, and he went back to the stool. And that is the last real conversation Roy and I had. Because you cannot save a man who has decided that the truth is his enemy. I would like to tell you Roy woke up. He did not. Roy's money ran out the way water runs out of a cracked jar, slowly and then all at once, and when it was gone, Jelly was gone within the month, which told its own clean story. And Roy was left with a rented room and a bar tab and that gray rum color in his face, and he got thinner, and the good humor finally went out of him too, and he became fully the thing I had seen in the doorway on my first morning. One of the quiet ones. He stopped buying the round because there was nothing to buy it with. He stopped talking. And I have told you what it means when a man who never stopped talking stops. Roy died last year. In his room. His heart, they said. And I am sure that is what the paper said. But I stood on a cell block for 30 years, and I know what it looks like when a man simply stops, when the routine and the purpose and the hope have all drained out, and the body is only the last to get the message. Roy did not die of his heart. Roy died of the stool. The Philippines did not kill him. It only revealed that he had already, years before, quietly given up. Back home, probably, long before he ever smelled the charcoal on the boulevard. This place just gave the giving up somewhere warm to finish. I paid for a little of Roy's funeral. Almost nobody came, and I stood there in the heat and I thought, that could be me. Every ingredient in that coffin, I had it too. A dead wife, a burned fortune, a hole where the purpose used to be. The only thing that put me at the graveside instead of in the grave was a schedule pinned to a refrigerator and a ledger with cold coffee on it, and one quiet question asked at the right table at the right time. So let me answer, now, the question I began with. The one that this whole story has been walking toward. Why do so many retirees out here become the walking dead? It is not the women. The bitter men will tell you it is the women. And it is not. Though some women out here will certainly help a falling man fall faster, it is not the country. The country is warm and cheap and full of kind people, and it will hold up a disciplined man beautifully. Here is the truth, as much of it as I have. A man comes out here already wounded. He has lost his work, or his wife, or his money, or his country, or some of each. And with them, he has lost the two things that were secretly holding him upright his whole life without his ever noticing them, his routine and his purpose. Back home, the cold and the cost and the culture propped him up anyway, gave him a shape to fill even when he was empty. Out here, all the props are gone. It is warm, so he need not organize his day against the weather. It is cheap, so his money will drink him to death very affordably. He knows no one, so no one will notice him slipping. And there is a stool and a bottle, and a friendly drowning man beside him, and no friction anywhere between him and the bottom. And so the emptiness, which he carried out here in his chest the whole time, finally has room to grow. That is all the walking dead are. Men whose inside emptiness finally found an outside with nothing to stop it. The Philippines did not empty them. It only removed the last few walls that were hiding how empty they already were. I refused it with the most boring tools in the world. I got up at the same time every day. I used my body until it was too tired to crave. I made myself useful to people who needed me, with a wrench in my hand and a small boy asking why. I never drank alone, not once. I told the truth about my money early and out loud, and I built my life on a foundation nobody could pull away. A home in my own name, and a reserve out of reach, and a partner I chose in daylight and slowly. And I never ever stopped watching the numbers, because the numbers are where the truth lives when the words are lying. And I have known that since I was a young man on a hard block a long way from here. None of it is exciting. That is the secret nobody wants. Doing it right is not exciting. Doing it wrong is very exciting, right up until the end. And then it is the most boring death there is, on a stool, in the heat, with a warm beer going flat. So here I am, 67 years old, and I will tell you plainly where I stand, because I promised you at the start no fairy tales. I am not rich. I will never be rich. The fund saw to that. But I am not careful either. Not in the way Sweden would have made me careful, counting the heating against the coffee. I live well, on my pension, several times over. I have a home that is mine, on a title in my own hand. I have a reserve in Sweden that has never been touched and never will be. And one day, it and the home go cleanly, by a will, to Mary Lou and to Anders as I have set it down. No hoping, no gravity, just paper that holds. And I have Mary Lou. Not a young girl on a beach. A 55-year-old woman now, with strong hands and a straight back, and her own money and her own opinions, who tells me when I am being a pompous Swedish fool, which is often. We are partners, equals. Two people who each buried a spouse, and each know exactly what the other one is worth, which is the only real foundation there is for the thing people call love. She still runs her carinderia. I still fix the foundation's pipes. Boyed is still stopped, for today, which is all any of us gets. And on Sundays, I still open the ledger with my coffee, and the heartbeat is clean, and Marilou still calls it my funny Swedish habit, and neither of us laughs too hard, because we both know it is the funny Swedish habit that kept us off the stools. I walk the boulevard most evenings still, and I pass the bars, and the men are still there, some new faces now, Roy's stool filled by somebody else's Roy, the same eyes not landing on anything, the same loud talk to keep the quiet away. And I do not judge them. I want to say that very clearly at the end here. I do not judge them, because I know exactly how thin the wall is between that stool and this pavement. I know I am one dead wife and one lazy year away from it myself. We all are, every one of us, out here. I just keep walking. Home, to a woman who knows the truth about my money, in a home that is legally mine, past the men who are dying on their feet in paradise, and I keep my own door in order, and I leave it open, in case one of them ever wants to walk through it toward something other than the bottle. That is the whole of it. That is how you do not become the walking dead. You keep your routine like your life depends on it, because it does. You stay useful to somebody. You tell the truth about your money out loud and early. You own only what can truly be yours, and you guard the rest from 10,000 kilometers away. You choose a partner slowly, in daylight, as an equal. You never drink alone. And you read the numbers, always, because the numbers do not know how to lie. And by the time the words start lying, it is the numbers that will save you, if you have kept them, and if you have the nerve to look. Thank you for listening to an old man. I hope some small piece of it is of use to somebody before it is too late for them. That was always the only point of talking at all. That was Magnus, and that is the answer he came all the way to Dumaguete to find, and then had the discipline to live. We tell a great many hard stories on this channel, stories that end on the stool he described, and it is worth sitting for a moment with one that did not, and asking why. Not luck, not a better woman or a kinder country. A man who had learned, in the hardest school there is, to watch, and who refused to stop watching just because he had finally, after everything, become happy. Being happy, he warned us, is when the guard drops. Perhaps that is the piece to carry out of this one. If Magnus said something tonight that you recognized from your own life or from a friend's, tell us in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, and if you have seen The Walking Dead he described. We already know that you have. Take care of the two boring things that hold you up, wherever in the world you are sitting. Thank you for being here with us. This has been Inside the Philippines Journals, and we will see you on the next one.